It's easy to mistake a hug for something simple. Most people do. They think it's just touch, just proximity, just muscle and skin. But when you look closer, when you begin to see what emotion actually feels like in the body, you realize that a hug is rarely about arms. It's about what happens underneath them. She leans in. You hold her. There's warmth, closeness, a shared breath. But what's actually being exchanged isn't physical. It's psychological. You're not just wrapping yourself around her body. You're standing in front of every fear she's carried in silence. A hug is the one moment where everything guarded can slip. It's quiet enough that her defenses pause. She's not performing, not protecting, not trying to be understood. Just present. And what you do in that moment, how you show up, what you signal, what your presence communicates, decides more than you think. Most men never realize what a woman is scanning for in those few seconds. Not words. Not plans. Not gestures. She's listening to how calm you are when nothing is said. She's tuned into whether you are actually there or just passing through on your way to the next thing you want. She doesn't care about the technique of the hug. She's watching how you carry her nervous system with yours. Few even notice it's there. You can't speak to that kind of depth unless you've been in it yourself. And that's the reason most moments fall flat. Because women don't open themselves to men who are only available on the surface. The body knows the difference between genuine safety and manufactured charm. She's felt that distinction more times than she can count. You're not going to reach her by being clever. You reach her by being honest. And not the kind of honesty that explains itself, but the kind that doesn't flinch when the moment gets real. When she steps into your space, she's testing something far more important than attraction. She's asking a question most people can't hear because they've never slowed down long enough to feel it. That question lives in her breath, in her hesitation, in the way she waits half a second longer before pulling away. She's not asking if you want her. She's asking if you're the kind of man who knows how to carry weight without being crushed by it. And in that space, with her pressed against you, your opportunity begins. Not to impress, to witness. Because what you say in that moment won't be judged by how smooth it sounds. It'll be judged by how deeply it resonates. That's why one sentence can shift the entire emotional reality between two people, if it's real. If it's spoken from a place that doesn't need to protect itself. You don't have to hold yourself up for me. Say that while holding her. Mean it. Say it slowly, like it didn't come from your mind but from the place in you that knows what it feels like to be tired of standing alone. 'Cause she does. And she may not say it, she may not even show it, but there are parts of her that have been holding their breath for years. When she feels that she can finally exhale in your presence, something shifts. It won't be loud or dramatic. It'll be quiet. But it will be real. That sentence only works if it reflects something you've earned internally. If you've made peace with your own emotional chaos. If you've stopped needing every connection to validate your worth. If you've faced the part of you that still confuses intensity for intimacy. Most men haven't. They walk around carrying stories of strength while avoiding the truth that real strength doesn't come from power. It comes from stability. Emotional presence isn't something you can fake. It's either integrated into your nervous system or it isn't. And when it isn't, she knows. Maybe not consciously. But her body does. She'll smile. She'll stay polite. But she won't surrender. Because surrender doesn't come from being told everything is fine. It comes from knowing that even if everything isn't, she won't be alone in the fallout. You can't ask for that kind of trust. You can only live in a way that inspires it. That means becoming the kind of man who doesn't see emotion as something to solve, but as something to meet. Who doesn't disappear when discomfort rises. Who doesn't flinch when vulnerability walks in unannounced. She's been through enough to know what it feels like to be embraced and still feel empty. She remembers how it felt when people touched her without ever seeing her. That's why this matters. When you say, you don't have to hold yourself up for me, you're not just offering comfort. You're giving permission. You're saying I'm here. Not because I need something from you, not because I want you to feel better so I can feel useful, but because I can handle being in the same room as your truth. Whatever shape it takes. That kind of presence is rare. And it's unforgettable. She may not respond right away. She might change the subject. She might laugh it off. But somewhere inside her, something rewrites itself. Because someone finally spoke to the part of her that isn't used to being spoken to. And that changes what she remembers about you. Not just in her mind but in her body. The imprint of safety is deeper than words. It's something you feel, sometimes even years later, when you're trying to understand why a certain moment still lingers. That's the power of being real. Not performative. Not perfect. Just grounded. And the reason most men can't offer that is because they haven't yet learned how to offer it to themselves. They've been trained to achieve, to impress, to lead. But they haven't been taught how to sit with discomfort without needing to escape it. And without that skill, their relationships become transactional. Unintentionally. But inevitably. Presence without emotional depth feels hollow. Touch without understanding becomes routine. Words, no matter how beautiful, become noise if the energy behind them isn't stable. That's why your hug matters more than you think. And why what you say during it can echo longer than anything you text, write, or promise. But only if it's true. Only if it comes from the part of you that's done trying to win. The part that's finally learned to simply be. When she hears it, not just the sentence but the tone beneath it, she might not even know how to respond. That's okay. It's not about her reaction. It's about what you're offering. It's about making space for her to land somewhere soft, even if just for a moment. You're not responsible for healing her, fixing her, or proving anything. You're just responsible for standing still while she finds her footing. That's how trust begins. Not with fireworks, with stillness. And in that stillness, you stop being just another man in her life. You become a place she remembers feeling safe. And in a world that teaches women to brace, that kind of memory is everything. There is a moment, often overlooked, that happens after the hug ends. Subtle, almost invisible, but it determines everything that follows. It's the moment she steps back, eyes lowered slightly, maybe a half smile on her lips, but she lingers. She hasn't moved away emotionally, even though her body has shifted. She's watching. Not in the obvious way but in the deeper, more human sense. Watching who you become when the closeness ends. This is the part most people don't understand. Connection doesn't solidify in the touch. It solidifies in the aftermath. When the nervous system is no longer flooded, when the body is no longer held, when silence returns and routine resumes. What you offer in those moments matters more than any grand gesture. It's easy to feel safe while wrapped in arms. It's harder to feel safe when you're looking into eyes that don't look away. And this is where many men lose what they never realized they were building. Because they don't know how to maintain presence once the emotional energy shifts. They step out of depth too soon. They return to distraction, sarcasm, avoidance. Not because they don't care, but because something in them doesn't know how to hold intimacy when it gets quiet. That silence, for them, feels threatening. So they change the subject, make a joke, retreat into thought. But to her, that retreat is familiar. It confirms a pattern she hoped wouldn't repeat. She knows what it's like to be felt in one moment and forgotten in the next. And so she folds that feeling back into her chest and labels it private. Another sacred part of herself that will not be shared again. At least not with you. This is why presence is not a moment. It's a capacity. It's not what you do during the hug. It's what you carry into the hours, days, and weeks that follow. Can she still feel your steadiness when there's nothing emotional to react to? Can she feel your attention when she isn't trying to earn it? Can you hold her in the ordinary? True connection is tested in the ordinary. In the moments that don't look romantic. In the spaces that feel mundane. In the pauses where most people stop listening because there's no obvious reward. She doesn't need you to perform, to entertain, to fix. She needs to know that your presence is real even when there's nothing to gain from it. And that presence must come from a place of inner clarity. You can't anchor someone else if you're drifting in your own life. You can't offer safety to her if you're still at war with yourself. Most people want intimacy without transformation. They want closeness without vulnerability. But emotional truth is not selective. You don't get to feel connection without also being exposed. That's the part many people avoid. But that's also where the entire thing becomes real. If you want to become the kind of man who can speak one sentence that transforms how she feels in your arms, you have to become the kind of man who has spoken honestly to himself in solitude. You've had to sit in your own stillness, in your own grief, in your own shame. You've had to face the reality that you've let people down, including yourself. That you've run when you should have stayed. That you've clung to control when you should have surrendered. That you've confused performance with presence, even when your heart wanted more. Only when you've told the truth to yourself do you know how to tell the truth in a moment of touch. And that's when the sentence works. That's when "you don't have to hold yourself up for me" becomes more than just sound. It becomes shelter. She doesn't need you to be a therapist, a savior, or a mind reader. She doesn't even need you to be perfectly healed. What she needs is someone who knows how to remain emotionally available in a world addicted to withdrawal. Someone who doesn't interpret closeness as pressure. Who doesn't use independence as an excuse to never be needed. Who can understand that human beings are not burdens, and that vulnerability is not a transaction to be tolerated. When you become that kind of presence, something shifts, not just in her but in you. You begin to feel what it's like to love without the weight of proving. You begin to understand that intimacy isn't about managing another person's emotions. It's about walking beside them through the weather they don't always understand themselves. You begin to sense that connection doesn't come from being impressive. Comes from being attuned. And when you reach that place, you realize something else. That everything in your past, every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment you felt unseen, was shaping you for this. Not so you could be perfect for someone else, but so you could become intimate with your own soul. So that when someone finally leaned into you, unsure and tired, you wouldn't flinch. You would simply remain. There is a version of love that most people never experience. Not because it's rare, but because it requires a level of presence most people never develop. It's not about intensity. It's about capacity. It doesn't show up as fire. It shows up as warmth that stays. The kind that remains even when the emotion has passed, even when the conversation ends, even when nothing exciting is happening. That's what makes a woman feel held. Not the moment of touch, but the depth of who's doing the holding. And when you offer that consistently, she begins to rest. Not in your arms but in herself. Because you've become the mirror that doesn't distort her reflection. You don't exaggerate her value to manipulate her. You don't minimize her emotions to protect yourself. You just see her. You remain human beside her. And that becomes her safety. She begins to realize she doesn't have to explain her anxiety before you'll understand it. She doesn't have to hide her disappointment to keep you engaged. She doesn't have to perform femininity in exchange for being cherished. She just gets to be. And for the first time in a long time, she begins to trust that who she is beneath the mask is enough to be met. That kind of transformation doesn't happen because you said something poetic. It happens because what you said came from a man who lives in truth. The hug just creates the window. The sentence you whisper, if it's real, opens it. But the trust that grows from it is what determines whether she stays or retreats. Whether she deepens or closes. Whether she lets you see her again. Most men ask how to keep a woman interested. They think the answer is hidden in strategies, timing, or performance. But the answer is much simpler. Become the kind of man who knows how to remain present when the moment no longer revolves around him. Become the kind of man who finds fulfillment in being, not just in doing. Become the kind of man who can say one honest thing in silence, and have it felt more deeply than all the noise that came before it. When you say, "You don't have to hold yourself up for me," and you mean it, you're not just communicating safety. You're offering freedom. You're saying, "You don't have to pretend here. You don't have to carry strength as armor. You don't have to ration how much of yourself you reveal. You can let the part of you that's been holding it all together rest. And I will not disappear when I see it." That's not romance. That's responsibility. Emotional responsibility. And the people who offer it change lives, whether they mean to or not. So the next time you hold her, really hold her, don't focus on what it might lead to. Don't worry about what she'll think of you. Don't rush to break the silence. Just be where you are. Listen to the tension in her shoulders. Feel the way she breathes against you. And when you speak, let it come from the place that no longer needs permission to be emotionally available. She'll feel it. She may not say anything. She may not move. But something in her will exhale. Something in her will soften. Not because you fixed her,